So we're coming to you this Saturday morning to give you some great information. Get your coffee, get your tea, get your water, get your good breakfast, because get a little closer, because this is going to be good. So today, Take a Look is coming to you. I am Dr. Quinyon Scott, and I have the honor of being here with
Christina Cook, Washington Post, Teacher of the Year.
Yes, Teacher of the Year. And today we're having a conversation with you about building community. As we are embracing the conversation, please feel free to put us a text, send us a chat, because we really want this to be an interactive conversation. And so Cook had a very interesting week. If you follow her, you know she's been on fire all week long. And so we want to have a conversation today about some of the things that she experienced via social media this week. But before we begin, it's important for us to let you know that we represent ourselves. We don't represent the organizations that we work for, and we are individual educators.
Girl, and my viewers, I had a spirited Bone Thugs-n-Harmony debate off with someone in a educator group. It will remain nameless, about the use of sarcasm to motivate and inspire children of color. All I'm gonna say is this: I believe that as professionals and as we grow as educators, we have to also grow our skill set with connecting with students. And so it's easy to crack the joke, it's easy like to laugh at a kid, but the question I have, and I'm thinking of my own horrible practices from the past, what has been the negative effects on that child's self-esteem because of something that I've said or I've done that I thought was in fun? So I asked that one educator one question. I'm gonna pose it to you all today, I'm gonna pose it to Dr. Scott. Does the word humor and sarcasm have the same connotation?
So, no, right? So humor and sarcasm, they don't have the same connotation. However, we often use them interchangeably. So that's number one. Number two, I'm thinking about over the years some teachers that I've deemed to be our popular teachers, and I've defined popularity based upon their student interaction, their ability to have relationships with students, their ability to tap into students that other people may not have had. And in many cases, it's been both humorous and sarcasm that has brought the student into a comfortable place that they've been able to have that relationship. So I do not prescribe sarcasm as a way of building relationship, but I think in a relationship, sarcasm plays its part.
Yeah, I would say, I think I agree with that too. I think it shouldn't be the only thing. I think it's a part of a relationship. And so I feel like, especially with the population of kids that Dr. Scott and I've served, middle school to high school students, they're extremely impressionable on the things that we say, and they live by our every word. So I'm just challenging all of us, including myself, to push past the little sneaky joke and to find more effective and creative ways to connect with students. And so today's conversation really is gonna lend itself to building relationships. Now, we've done a series. We have how many shows now?
I think we're up to like 7 or 8.
Yes. So we've given you all the tea on how to get started, how to figure out what your kid is doing in Google Classroom. But now today, we want to talk about maintaining what we've allowed you to get started, and it's with relationships. So Dr. Scott, will you give us some expertise on how can teachers continue to build relationships with kids virtually? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say that the first thing in truly building a relationship is getting to know your students. And so we have been having the virtual experience now. I'm thinking about in the District of Columbia, many schools have been in now 2-3 weeks. Of course, in Maryland, schools just started last week. But it's so important that you take the time to build relationships. And so what does that mean? Part of that is ensuring that you know the student's name, that you're able to pronounce their name correctly. Also, identify a fact that it's between you and the student, where you are able to pull that fact out and connect to the student. That becomes so important, because the student may forget that they've shared the information with you, but you knowing that will be very helpful. And I'm thinking about the relationships when I, as a principal, have asked teachers about their spouse or their children, or if they were currently in school, and how me extending that olive branch has then helped build a relationship. And I truly believe that it's like this triad approach, that it's a triad approach between the administrator building relationships with its teachers, and then the teachers building relationships with the students, and then the other arm that's among all three of those stakeholders is that all three of those stakeholders building relationships with parents. And then you really truly have like the perfect square.
I agree.
One of the things you said in the beginning that I really want us to go back to is that, can teachers be effective when they're sarcastic with their children? And Charlotte Danielson, which many observers use, best practices says sarcasm has no place in the classroom. But I do believe that in many cases, sarcasm has helped to bridge and foster relationships. Now that you're no longer in the classroom, what are your thoughts?
So I sit now in a really tight seat, having just been a teacher less than 6 months ago, and I'll always be a teacher, even though I'm not in the classroom, leading now from an administrative role. And I sit also as a parent, listening to teachers interact with my kids, which was something I wasn't able to do before. I was only able to hear my kids' side of the story when they came home from school. And so I'm loyal to the teacher. If the teacher said you did it, you probably did. But now that I get to listen all day, I'm starting to think twice about how our interactions are having negative effects on our students. And so I feel like it's a fine line, Dr. Scott. Because when you open up Pandora's box and you go there with a kid with your sarcasm, when that kid then reciprocates it back to you and it was better than yours, now you're sitting there in a trick bag, as my mama used to say. And so I think for children to feel safe, we need to be very careful about blurring those lines with them. Because when they cross the line, because they don't know, right? All the brain research talks about how the frontal lobe isn't fully developed until they're in their early 20s, and some later than that, right? When they blur the line and you're offended, then what? You've now torn that relationship because you haven't made them feel safe. And so it's just something now to consider, like even with my own children, I don't blur the lines, right? This is what it is, because I know my job is to parent. It's not to be their friend, but it's to guide and lead them until they can find their own way. Now, if they get older and we want to be good Judys and best friends, I'm all here for it. But until then, it's my job to lead. And it's making me think, because this was happening to me this week, I felt my inner Harriet Tubman rising up. So let's go to Harriet Tubman. Now, if you've seen the movie, you know the people tried her, okay? When she was getting ready to lead the people to the water, her own people tried her gangster. And she didn't blur the line. She said, listen, this is where I'm going. Either you're coming with me or you're not. She didn't compromise. She didn't sacrifice. And if you've seen the movie, you know how the rest of the story ends. So I think we need to be really careful about that fine line.
And I'm wondering if we're getting vernacular confused, right? So I'm thinking about sarcasm versus insult.
Okay.
A fine line, but definitely two different things. And then when you mention Harriet Tubman, I'm thinking about sarcasm versus expectation.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, in Harriet Tubman's case, the people following her, they were fearful, so that impacted their expectation. They were following her because they believed, right?
Yeah.
But they just didn't believe 100%.
Correct.
They believed like 50%.
Correct.
And so that the other 50% that they didn't believe impacted them to be fearful enough where they were able to have different discussions. They were able to say different things. In some cases, they died, right?
Yeah, they did.
Because they just were fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're fearful, it impacts education. Same thing in the classroom, right?
Yeah.
When you have a student who truly doesn't believe in a teacher, they don't learn as much as they should.
Agreed.
They have different ideas of what the teacher should be teaching. And so I'm sure that now that you're home and you're able to see these other teachers, I'm sure that's impacting, like, oh, that teacher has low expectations. Oh, that teacher doesn't know their craft. Because you're now in a seat where you're evaluating your own teachers, right? And so that hat doesn't just turn off when you are doing your own thing at home. So now you have this evaluator's hat and you're looking at everyone. So I'm thinking that, you know, I'm not advocating for sarcasm. It's important that you build relationships by truly knowing the student, knowing their deficits, identify what they need. These things help to build relationships.
Yeah, I agree. And to add on to your point, like, because we're virtual, we add a whole nother level of like accountability, right? And so one of the things I'm noticing, if I give verbal directions, okay, and the kid misses it for whatever reason, and they ask, well, what did you say? And my response is, well, you should have been listening. Now we're teetering on that line of like sarcasm, right? Because if I'm asking a question, which we've taught children to do, ask when you don't know, then when we give them that, and we haven't prepared them to be successful in every arena, right? Verbal directions, written directions, model the directions. We've now hit every learning modality, and then we need to check for understanding. And so, like, as an adult, this is what I'm thinking. Adults don't like to be called out. Adults don't like if their boss is sarcastic with them. They'll be right in HR. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah.
So then if that's the case as an adult, then why would you do that to a child? If as an adult, if you come to a meeting late or you come to Zoom late and your boss is like, you late, and you don't have an opportunity to gather yourself, get yourself together, you're going to feel some kind of way. I know many of you who are tuning in personally, can't nobody tell y'all nothing without you catching an attitude. So I'm just thinking, what is the impact of that on students? Even if I have a good relationship, everyone deserves to keep their dignity. And that's, I think, my like claim to fame and fight for children. They deserve that.
Yeah, I agree too. My former supervisor would say to me all the time, let grace abound.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I would say, like, she's so churchy all the time, right? This is too much church. Like, I love a good church, but like every day, come on. But I find myself saying, let grace abound, especially in this time.
Yeah.
So you have teachers who are used to teaching a certain way, and using your example while you're teaching a certain way. If the student doesn't get the directions, oftentimes they're not paying attention. And so you translate that same idea like, oh, you didn't get it because you must not have been listening to me, versus I just didn't understand.
Yeah.
And so you instantly get on the offensive side because you feel like I was clear enough that you should have gotten my direction. And I think that there has to be this level of grace, right, for everyone, for the student who is at home, and in many cases they don't want to be at home or they just haven't gotten into their groove yet of what that means to be at home, for the teacher who is really fighting, like, I hate teaching virtually, I hate what this is doing to us politically, but I have to do it, and just learning the process. I was on a line with the school yesterday providing some support to the school. They just started Schoology, and they had just had a town hall meeting, and she was saying that the leader was indicating that part of the major issue, and this is a secondary, is that many of the students had a very hard time with interacting with the software.
Yes.
And of course, you know, in our minds, we're like, children are on technology way too much. They can teach us, so that's really not true.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is that it's a different form of technology.
Absolutely.
And
preaching today. Come on, church.
you know, being able to actually work your phone, create a movie, you know, be on a video game is a different set of skill
Yeah.
than actually logging on, doing work, taking an assessment. And in many cases, if it's time, it's just a different level of skill.
Yeah.
And so part of that is that in this time, it's still new.
It is.
Like if you think about it, March to June, we were still scrambling.
Yeah.
And so in many cases, especially urban districts where we're familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
urban schools, they just did not have the technology they
Right.
needed to be successful. And in many cases, forget urban, because I'm thinking about Harford County,
Yeah.
who is not urban,
Right.
but they don't even have enough technology for their students. So you're still having these large districts with millions of dollars still scrambling so that students can be successful.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they're failing miserably.
Yeah, that was deep. And Mr. Murphy, we miss you too. Mr. Murphy says, miss y'all. And yeah, he quoted something I used to say, you can't close the achievement gap if the achievers are in the hallway. I firmly believe that. I think, Dr. Scott, you have modeled and been such a great advocate of allowing people to have grace and to save face. And I've watched you do that as a school leader, and I think it's a skill. And I think if we want the big results and we want children to produce for our big priorities, we have to extend that same amount of grace and peace unto them. Because you've taught me this so many times, that Cook, it's not about you. It's about sometimes what people are personally going through that has nothing to do with you, that they bring when they come to work. And Dr. Scott used to always teach us when she was training her core team at our previous school, people show up as who they are, period. Not who they are at work, but just who they are. And so my challenge and push to all of us in the educational space is to get better at who you are, because children's lives are dependent upon it. Your own mental health is dependent upon you getting better, and maybe saying the serenity prayer to yourself every day, which is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and then the wisdom to know the difference. Like, we can't do anything about the virtual environment. It just is. That's the given. But what we can do is adjust how we view the virtual environment and how we interact so that children will win. Because here's the reality. If we don't open back up for another year, we would have
Very
had
real.
2 years of loss. And I'm sitting here as a parent like, no, I can't, my kids can't afford another day of a teacher being ineffective. They just can't afford it.
Yeah, so thank you, Cook. I think that we are in a true state of crisis. So if you've watched the DNC, the RNC, everyone, both parties said that this is the most important election ever in history. And I'm thinking about, it's important, but important for so many reasons.
Yeah.
And one of those reasons is the state of education in America. And, typically it's the state of education, the state of public education.
Mm-hmm.
But in this particular case, it's not public education, it's truly the state of education.
Yeah.
Because you have so many schools who are suffering. Now, the positive is that, the private schools, they will regain momentum and put things in place because they have the financial means too.
Yeah.
In public school, one of the things that's going to happen is that there's going to be, the gap is going to widen. And we talk about the achievement gap, but to narrow the achievement gap, it's reading scores, right? The reading ability for students is going to widen. And so what does that really mean? That means that your child, based upon what grade level that they're in, they should be on that same reading level. That is going to change because if they've been in 3rd grade and they were supposed to be headed to 4th grade, the reading level, unless you've been working with them, unless they were already advanced, the reading level is going to be altered because they haven't had the practice. And remember, reading is truly about reading. It's also about comprehension. And there's so many other things that happen in order for a child to read. But if they don't get the foundation, then it's very, very difficult. I was with friends the other night, and they were talking about they have a child in second grade. They have other children that are older, and they were saying that, you know, they just feel like second grade is one of the most important grades, and they really had to work hard to ensure that their children get what they need, their child gets what they need for second grade. And I said, you know, second grade is important, and this is the evidence, is that third grade, they determine that by the third grade test scores, it's how you determine the number of jails you're going to have in your city.
Yeah.
So it's so important what you do second grade, because it immediately goes into third grade. And so you as a parent has to consider about how do you ensure that your child doesn't get left behind. Like, it's no longer on the government,
right,
because you can't depend on public education during this time.
Absolutely.
It truly has to be you making sure that your child doesn't get left behind. I want to go back to like building community, right? Because I think it has so much to do with ensuring that your child isn't left behind, because part of that is that your child has to have the mental stability to learn, and that's truly a part of building a community. And I wrote down a few notes. So one is for teachers, making sure that you have like weekly meetings. And so over the years, depending on where I've been, this has been called different things. I'm thinking about it's been called a town hall, it's been called morning meeting, it's been called army talk. And so just thinking about like, how as an educator do you ensure that you're having a weekly meeting, that you're able to engage students, you're able to provide a celebratory event, even virtually. Shout out to Michael Murphy, because he does this very well.
Yes, he does.
And how do you ensure that you are engaging students, that you are having a different setting with them?
And I want to give a shout out to Diamond Johnson, who's on joining us. She used to do this with students, really, build them up and bring them in every morning with high expectations. And I'm shouting her out because she was one of our younger teachers. But as a younger teacher, she understood expectations are expectations, right? From Washington, D.C., but she never wavered in what she wanted kids to be, because she was from the neighborhood. And so shout out to you, Ms. Johnson, if you're still on here with us. Appreciate you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Great job, Diamond. And then focus on gratitude.
Yes.
So when we talk about grace, I think grace and gratitude really go hand in hand, and thinking about what are you grateful for?
Yeah.
And oftentimes we don't bring that into the atmosphere when we walk into the classroom. But as a teacher, it's so important that you bring that gratitude of while you're there. And oftentimes the gratitude is really the vehicle that allows us to bring our best selves for students. And just thinking about how do you allow that to show up every day so that you're able to bring your best self, and your best self will pull out the best of children.
Yeah, to add on to that, Dr. Scott, I appreciate that, because this is what I'm noticing. Teachers are frustrated with the technology, and I get it. It's a lot. You know, everyone's logged into Google Classroom, Google Meet, Zooms, all that's happening at one time. But kids can also feel when you're not feeling grateful, or you're frustrated and flabbergasted. And then that energy now pushes onto them, but that's your energy, right? Like, it's like this. Don't expect, expect what you think is going to happen, right? Like, let me rephrase that. You know you're going to have technology challenges. Expect it. You buy an umbrella because you know one day it's going to rain, right? With everyone using technology, one day it's not going to work. And I say that because I've had to say that to my own children in the home. When they get kicked out of the Google Meet, they're huffing and puffing. And I'm like, be thankful that you have a Google Meet to log right back on into. And so I think that's the shift. Because you can't build relationships with kids if you're complaining every time they log into the computer. Oh, this isn't working. Oh my gosh. Two things. Practice, plan, rehearse, and repeat. That's what we have to do. We have to expect those things are going to happen, and then prepare kids for those things happening, and say, hey, don't get frustrated. Just log right on back in.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the best things you can do.
Yeah.
Something else that I wanted to say is something really, really good. And Cook, you do this so well. Celebrate. So Cook has this way of, she can identify good in everybody. So she's like, oh my goodness, I love this jean jacket. This jean jacket is so fabulous, blah, blah, blah. And what I realized is that it truly takes a special person to be able to accept a compliment and to celebrate others. And so I encourage you to practice.
Yes.
And I'm thinking of a woman that we worked with, I won't mention her name, and she had a hard time accepting a compliment. And so I would say, like, oh, your pants are so nice. And she'd be like, oh, they only cost $2 from, Ross. Like, ma'am, just say thank you and keep it moving. You know what I mean? But you have to teach children early how to celebrate themselves.
Absolutely.
And be able to celebrate others. But that's a learned skill. And even though to the woman who couldn't accept the compliment, it's really deeper than just accepting a compliment. Because if you can't accept a compliment from a stranger, and if you can't accept a compliment from somebody that you're close to, so I'm thinking your spouse, then that impacts your self-esteem and your own image.
Absolutely.
And so part of that is being able to say your own affirmations, right? I am good enough. They're right. My pants are great. I purchased them, right? I wore them because I realized they look good on me. And so when you can speak those own affirmations about to yourself, then you're able to accept the compliment, but more importantly, you're able to give the compliment.
I agree. And here's to add on to what Dr. Scott said. The compliments aren't fake. Like, I genuinely am cheering for others because my mentor taught me early, a candle loses nothing when it lights another candle. And so cheering for Dr. Scott, who is looking fabulous this morning, doesn't take away from it doesn't take away from who I am, right? And so I think part of it too, again, Dr. Scott alluded to this, when you know who you are, you operate in that gift. My job in the world, in case folks didn't know, I'm a connector. I connect people to their purpose. So by complimenting someone else, that's connecting them to where they're supposed to be. So it doesn't affect me that way, but I do agree. Again, here's my little other Harriet Tubman moment. We got a lot of broken adults breaking other people's children. And I'm sorry to say it, but I'm not having it in 2020 going forward. I am on the teacher renegade police because it's so hard to rehabilitate an adult, but it's so much easier to raise up a strong child. And so we have to continue to do that in this season and for this reason. That rhymes.
It does rhyme. Kudos, right? English teacher, yes. I'm thinking about how many teachers that we have that impact building a community because they break children's dreams.
Jeez. Woo.
And I'm thinking about my favorite uncle. I probably shouldn't have said that. He's just my uncle. He's not my favorite. But my Uncle Leonard, who went to West Virginia State University, and his counselor, this was in the 70s, his counselor believed that he wasn't going to be successful and that he shouldn't go. But he played football. They were offering him a football scholarship. And so he went. So part of one of the things that plagues him, right, is that he had a counselor that told him that he wasn't going to be successful. And so I think even though that was 50 years ago, he's now in his 70s, or he'll be 70, his whole thing is oh, I was successful. I've been able to make this amount of money. I've been able to cultivate these businesses, and I was able to finish school, but I still had this counselor who said that I wasn't going to be successful. And so I'm thinking about things we say, dreams we attempt to kill, all because of our own inadequacies. And being mindful of not the sarcasm, right? But the low the sarcasm is important, but I'm thinking about the low expectations we have for one another that really kills children.
I agree. I'm getting chills thinking about it because we do it subconsciously every day, right? We ask a kid what do they want to be when they grow up, and they say an astronaut, or they say a dancer or singer. And the first thing we do is push our middle class or lower to middle class values on that student. And we no longer have that right. That's not our job. Our job is to teach kids to think, but not to teach them what to think. Because some of y'all's thinking is stinking. it's not rooted in anything but evilness and jealousy and deceit. And I'm going to say it, Scott, because there's too many children that have negative experiences, and they remember those negative experiences with a teacher than they remember a positive experience. And so what was the ratio? I think for every negative experience a kid has, they need to have 7 positive ones. Well, what if it's the end of the day and your experience was the last experience they had? That was the negative one. And then they have to go home and get 7 more negative experiences. They now need 14 positive to combat those negative ones that they had. And so we need to do a better job as a community, period. We are doing more damage to our brown and black children than the police or the government will ever do, because it's starting with us.
Yeah.
And hey, Marsh, we see you. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Marsh.
Marsh at Renegades.
I'm reminded of a child who I saw this interaction between mother and daughter. They were sitting in my office one day, and she said, I should have just had an abortion years ago.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, I had to go into the bathroom. I was in tears. And I said, I was suspending the child. She was nasty. She was, off the hook. And when her mother said that, it was an aha moment for me. Like, look, you got to build a relationship with her. Mm-hmm. You have to start engaging her in a different way. Mm-hmm. I don't care how nasty she is. You just got to do better with her. Mm-hmm. I'm also in how... If your mother tells you, your mother's your first relationship, your first interaction. So if you have a negative relationship mm-hmm. with your mother, if your mother is feeding you things like, I should have killed you, because that's really what an abortion is, right? Yeah. I should have taken your life. Yeah. I should have ensured that you aren't here. Mm. Can you imagine how that makes you feel?
I mean, I can only try to imagine, right? Because I had a decent relationship with my mom, but that's what a lot of kids come to Zoom with, those type of interactions. And then we add our additional sarcasm on top of brokenness, and we wonder why we can't get results, because we're not dealing and catering to the whole child. I want us to just pause really quickly. We have a lot of folks that have joined us. We appreciate you all for being on here. We want to just give you an opportunity to ask a question or make some comments. Our producer is monitoring our screen, so we just want to make sure that we're acknowledging your presence, because you don't have to be here with us this morning, and sharing your feedback and comments with everyone available. So, yeah, Marsh, what did Marsh say? Marsha has a comment. She said,
the reason for if no one tells you today, I love you.
Oh, we love you too.
Yeah, and that's Marsha's tagline. She definitely lets the students know that she loves them, which is really important. But it's only important if that's who you are. Yeah. If you're not that core person that you have this love for everyone, then it doesn't make sense for you to say that to a child. But what everybody can do, and this is for parents and children, is ensuring that while you are preparing the child for online, while you're teaching them, there is this sense of building community. And one of the last key things mm-hmm. of building a community is making a child, the adult, feel valued. Yeah. And I just got finished doing this research on why people leave companies. And one mm-hmm. of the major things of why people leave companies is that they don't feel valued. And value comes in different ways, right? Yeah. It's monetary. Yeah. It's kind words and affirmations. Mm-hmm. And I think about, in some cases, for me, one of the biggest things of feeling valued is like having a parking space.
Absolutely.
And so, but value is different things. And I'll say that as a school principal, I had a difficult time of identifying how to make all teachers feel valued. Mm-hmm. Great time if I was able to connect with you. Like if we had this connection, I could make you feel valued. Mm-hmm. But if there was no connection, creating the connection is one level, and then identifying what makes you feel valued. But then you bring yourself with you. So if you're in limbo, or if you one day this, one day that, oftentimes that value would change. And so I spent a lot of time identifying how can I make you feel valued, because I understood that if a teacher feels valued, they will make children feel valued. But as teachers, I encourage you to push past the relationship you have with your administrator and identify how do you make your class, how do you make individuals, and not just your favorite ones, right? How do you make all children feel valued when they come through the door? And recently we were talking about a student who the thought was that I didn't like the student, and I'm thinking about CW. And this chick was a trip, right? Like, we have definitely gone at it. But one of the things is that I knew that it was so important for me to make her feel valuable because she was extremely talented, and I thought that it was my job to help support her talent. So I would say things like, oh, you're a great model, oh, you're beautiful, and she'd be like, oh, whatever, always nasty. But, well, I mean, she did have some good moments, but the idea was that if I can make you feel like you're valued, maybe that'll help you change and shift who you believe you are.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's small things, right? Like, it's small wins. Before you start your major lesson, right? Check in with kids. If you had them do a writing assignment, actually read their assignment and give some shout outs and praise about some of the positive things that you saw with the work. To Dr. Scott's point, if you know some things about them and those Google forms you create and you ask them getting to know you, have kids share. Tell me more. I see that you play chess. Tell me more about how you started playing chess. What's your greatest challenge? Hey, I noticed that your homework is always in pink ink. Tell me more about why you like colors. And since you can see kids' backgrounds, like a lot of kids are showing off their pictures, their rooms, take a general interest in someone other than yourself, right? If you want we always about research and giving you tools. If you're interested in becoming a book you can read, changed my life, is John C. Maxwell's, I'm sorry, not John C. Maxwell's. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It changed my life on how I look at people, because people are tuned into one station, and that station is what's in it for them. And so when you can allow people to talk more about themselves, you really can connect. And then you'll find you have more commonalities than you do differences. But when the conversation is always about you and how you did this and that happened to me, you're not being a good listener. You're being a good person that's listening in order to respond. But you're not just being able to sit in the moment when someone has a tragedy. I'm going to prove it to you. How many times does someone call us with a situation and the first thing we say to them is, oh, don't feel that way, or it's going to be okay? Sometimes it is okay to tell them, I understand how you feel. And it's okay to feel what you're feeling. Validate where people are in the moment. Give them that space to feel before you try to take them to the promised land. Yeah, because when you say, oh, don't feel like that, you're invalidating how they're feeling. Who are you to tell somebody how they feel? You don't know, right? And don't do I know how you feel because that happened to me. Just be. Give them their moment, because people will appreciate that more than anything.
Yeah. Don't dismiss people.
Yeah,
right?
Please don't.
Subconsciously, we dismiss people. Oh, we have to go. But I wanted to talk about this, and so it has to be next week. So before we started, we were talking about, does every Black African-American woman educator in urban education show up as mama?
Woo!
And so that's a spicy question. Like, hot tea, cold tea, like, you get your answer together, right? Do you connect more with the mama, or are you fine with it's a teacher relationship from a parent perspective and from a child? And so, again, it's Take a Look. I am Dr. Quinyon Scott, and I'm here with
Christina Cook.
Please tune in to us next week, same time, Saturday morning, 9:30. We can't wait to see you, and we hope that you will send us notes, contacts, texts, so that we know how we did.
Yeah, so don't forget, it's the Black Teacher, Black Mama. That's for next week. See y'all later. Bye. Scott, that was perfect.
We've
We knew-
only been waving for like 10 minutes.